Read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 10 by Menendez.
Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, at the crux of the issue for many of us is the willingness to invest in this new educational program without us first fully supporting our public schools the way we feel they need to be. In my own district, many of my schools are facing steep budget deficits, and they have crippled their ability to provide services and resources to their students. Edgewood ISD, home of the historic Supreme Court case on school finance and equity, has closed the doors of many schools, cut staff and programs, and yet still faces a $17 million deficit. And while I'm eagerly awaiting the many other opportunities we will have this session to improve the financial situation in our public schools, this bill in particular has the potential to harm them. For example, I represent a highly urban area with several opportunities for students to avail themselves of these ESAs, and even if only the 2% that we've been hearing about of these public school students leave for one of the private schools or home schools, they leave their public schools, our schools would lose $142 million. And while this may not sound as harmful as you assume, that the cost of education also follows the child, however, many are fixed costs that our schools have to work around. Last session alone, we asked for increases in paying for school safety equipment. We've mandated a qualified armed guard at every campus. They have to hire the teachers, the employees to serve the number of students that started the school year. And they're also paying for increased cybersecurity and insurance costs to protect their infrastructure. So we keep hearing over and over that this bill is not going to hurt our public schools, and we have a budget surplus to make sure that it doesn't. So this amendment does two things. The first, it holds our school districts harmless for 3 years to give them time to adjust to any volatility in enrollment or attendance when this ESA program launches. Secondly, if the federal government decides to bring school choice and make it a priority themselves, as the president has indicated through a recent executive order, what this bill would say is that for every dollar that we receive from the federal government, that we take a matching amount and redirect it into our foundation school program. In doing so, we can make sure that our schools have the money they need. I was just asking how much are these increases in the evaluations for special needs students? They're at least $500. In the last few years, our public schools have been hit with record numbers of families asking their kids to be evaluated for special education. We have got to make sure that we give the public schools the tools they need. And some of those tools are going to help them maybe apply for this ESA program. This amendment would make sure that we don't hurt them in the process. And with that, Mr. President, I move adoption of floor amendment number 10.
Senator Alvarado, what purpose? Okay. Senator Eckhart, for what purpose?
To ask questions of the author of the amendment.
You are recognized. Do you yield?
Yes, of course.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you so much for this amendment, Senator. What's the current deficit for school districts in your community?
It depends. There are different ones running different deficits. Most of them are in the tens of millions of dollars. Edgewood, one of the smaller districts, is at 17 million currently. San Antonio Independent School District last year alone closed around 19 schools. And so a lot of this is already due to the fact that they have a lot of competition where it's pulling kids out of their urban schools. And so their costs remain fixed and they're having trouble maintaining their budgets.
Also in my district, I'm seeing school closures. Valley View Elementary School and the Eanes ISD, which is one of our best school districts in the nation. And the Austin ISD School Board is considering closing some of their schools as well. School districts are already taking extreme measures to raise revenue. In my district, we recently had a bond proposition generating $171 million in new revenue. $171 million. The school district got to keep $41 million, and it sent $130 million to the state. asking voters to support a tax increase in which the majority of the funds, 2/3 of the funds, would not stay in the district was a tough choice, but it was the only option. So, precious dollars that taxpayers intended for their communities will be sent away. Recapture occurs in property wealthy districts when the property tax revenues exceed the district entitlements. What are the school districts in your area looking at for recapture?
Well, as you know, recapture occurs when these property wealthy districts have this tax revenue that exceeds the district's entitlement, which is based on the student population. So with fewer kids enrolled at the schools, the districts are going to receive lower entitlement, meaning fewer funds for the district. A dip in enrollment means the districts, which already are having to make do with less, are going to be forced to make cuts. That's going to mean laying off teachers, possibly closing schools. And you know, I think that if this goes on statewide, if 5% of the students leave public education for a voucher, it's going to cost the state possibly a little over $2 billion. And I just received some information. San Antonio Independent School District has a $40.8 million budget deficit at the end of this school year.
Wow. So we have heard Senator Creighton say that it is a myth that this proposal of his will take money from our public school districts. How much would it cost in your district if this provision passes?
If 5%, if you get to a 5% uptake in this, we would see about $178 million in losses. San Antonio Independent, ISD, inner city school district would lose about $18 million. So, you know, it could be devastating.
So without this amendment, we know that this will destabilize our schools, but your amendment would at least delay that destabilization and give them a chance to adjust?
Absolutely. I mean, and the reality is that if everything that Senator Creighton proposes works as he plans, then there is no harm, no foul, and you know, we move on. The 3-year hold harmless is just that. It's just in the event that you're not going to lose any more money than you're already losing. They're already running at a deficit. So we're not saying we're going to give them some sort of lottery windfall. It's just saying don't allow them to lose money while we see how this ESA takes place. Maybe there isn't a 2% uptake. Maybe it's smaller. We'll see how it works. But in the process, let's ensure that we don't hurt any of our school districts. And so this is an amendment that protects all of our public school districts around the state. And in doing so, the 98% of students, that 5.2 to 5.3 million kids that are in the school district. So earlier, Senator Creighton talked about helping the children, fighting for the children being there. That's exactly what we're trying to do with this amendment, is making sure that we have the resources in place so they can have the right number of teachers, so they can have appropriate classrooms, so they're not overcrowded. And so that's what we're trying to do, is defend the overwhelming majority of the kids who are going to remain our public schools.
Thanks so much for the amendment.
Thank you.
I'll be voting for it.
Thank you for your questions.
But my colleagues will too.
Senator Creighton on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, Senator Menendez speaks of concerns about a school district in his district possibly losing $142 million in funding. We are advancing a base bill with historic, incredible funding for public schools, public school teachers, and their compensation. Separately from that, many of these school districts received billions and billions of dollars across all of these districts. We have at least 1 or 2 districts that received $1 billion just for that district in federal ESSER 1, 2, and 3 tranches. And that money is now gone. And that money was used in fiscal cliff types of decision making by those CFOs against the advice of letters coming from myself and from the TEA, and declined workshops on how to avoid those fiscal cliffs that the TEA offered, and very, very few superintendents or CFOs bothered to show up at those workshops. This legislation, consistent with the rest of the nation, where you look at all school choice programs across the country, the nation's school choice programs in the aggregate involve 2.4% of public school kids. With incredible enrollment growth in Texas, with incredible budgets that we're bringing forward on behalf of public schools, this amendment is not only necessary, those budget concerns and fears are unwarranted. I move to oppose the amendment.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hagenbu, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa of Nueces, Hinojosa, Hidalgo, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, King, Colcourse, Menendez, Middleton, Miles, Nichols, Parker, Paxton, Perry, Schwertner, Sparks, West, and Zaffarini.
11 ayes, 20 nays. The amendment fails. Members, the following amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
For Amendment 11 by Menendez.
Senator Menendez, when you're